Good afternoon. Welcome to Agree to Disagree. John and I are here, and this will play for a couple of weeks, so I'm going to make an announcement on voting, and just so we're not repeating ourselves. And John?
Yeah, I think, it's certainly an interesting race going on.
John Cochran. Yeah, John.
John Cochran, yes.
I don't know who you are, so we won't
You might remember me from last week. You might not, so again, John Cochran.
Yeah.
And I've known Don for quite a while. I served on the Finance Committee when he was serving as selectman of the town. As you know, this vote is coming up quickly on the state senate. And we talked a little bit about it last time and thought we'd talk a little bit more about it this time.
Yeah, I'll ask you to go into your resume, I guess, on Mr. Gomez.
Yeah,
but before I do that, I will say to people, this will play for 2 weeks. That's what our show plays for. So the vote will have already taken place in the latter part. But for right now, it's the 25th. So it's a week from Tuesday. We tape this show on a Monday. And it's the 25th. It's on a Tuesday. It's from 7 in the morning till 8 at night. And it's the senatorial race. But I also want to say, before I lose your attention on elections, that if you're wondering about the debt exclusion on the roof or the slots, which will be something the town will vote on, that will be in August. So that's not coming up. So if I may just one more time say to you, it's the 25th. It's a week from Tuesday. If this is shown on the 26th, it was yesterday. You missed it? John.
That makes sense. Well, I think you might have learned from the last show, and if not, you probably learn now that Dawn kind of favors Mr. Markey.
Edward Markey.
And I'm a fan of Gabriel Gomez, and we talked a little bit about that. The reason why I'm really a little kind of excited about Gomez is if you look at his overall background, he really is an incredible American story. There's no doubt about it. You look at things that represent, you can only do this in America, and Gabriel Gomez is certainly an example of that. He starts with the immigrant parents. He becomes a Navy pilot, and later becomes a Navy SEAL. Now that in itself is an accomplishment, because what I learned is that very, very few Navy pilots are also Navy SEALs, and vice versa. He got his MBA from Harvard Business School.
I've heard of that school, John.
Yeah. That's a pretty good school.
I'm not sure, but I think that's a good school.
I think it is, yeah. And he's proven himself to be a successful businessman. Sure. He's already shown tremendous personal drive to get where he's gotten, against all of these impediments. And I like him because when I've listened to him, he thinks outside the box.
Yep.
He's got some new ideas.
Term limits.
Yes, term limits is one of them, which I agree with and you do not agree with.
That's
correct?
Right. Well,
I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, but I'm going to quickly give you one of his problems.
Okay.
The people who come in to endorse him, John McCain, has been on since 2 days after the Mayflower docked. I mean, the people who come in to endorse him, they're looking for Brown, who was a career politician and from Norfolk, Mass, I believe, in the state. So these people, they're saying, why aren't these people coming in to endorse you? And he said, they're working behind the scenes for me. They're people who have violated his code of term limits. So it's very difficult to get people to work for you when you're working against what they do for a living.
That's a good example, though, of what I mean of thinking outside the box.
Oh, he does that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah. And the other thing I like about him is he differs with his own party on some major issues.
Which is why he hasn't got them working.
Well, that's right. He doesn't. He's not politically based in terms of, I want to use all the political avenues here to get what I want. He's actually still, I'll use the word pure enough, if you will, to not be tainted.
Innocent. He's an innocent.
He's an innocent. Exactly right.
Right.
And for instance, he disagrees with his party on immigration, gay marriage.
But John, as of this day, we don't even know what his party thinks about immigration. Yeah. How can he disagree with them?
Yeah, well, I think in terms of some of the things that he wants to make sure
Oh,
of,
okay.
elements of the immigration,
Okay.
he's already shown to go against what they seem to be pushing
Okay. All right.
in
Okay.
Congress
All
right
right,
now.
I'll go.
And then the last thing is, he really is a fresh face, and he's not beholden to political allies. That gets back to what you were talking about a little earlier.
Yeah.
Is he a political genius? Absolutely not. He's
Right.
too fresh, he's too young.
Yeah.
He probably has not had much experience, if any experience, in dealing with it from that perspective. But again, I don't see that as necessarily harmful. We have too many people that, get in line and march, so to speak. And so I consider him a
Well, there's
refreshing
lots of
prospect.
things. What you say, all is true, what you say. But then it comes time that a person goes to the ballot box and votes.
Right.
And when they go to the ballot box, as much as they get, go get them Tiger on term limits, go get them on this, go get them on that. When they go there, the interesting thing about Massachusetts voters are they're well educated in the political scenario of things. Basically, the people who have been their heroes over the years have been people who had no opinion on term limits, never gave it any thought. Tip O'Neill. All politics is local. John Fitzgerald Kennedy. You can go right down the list of all of them, and all of them never presented a case for term limits. Now, I know people say it would be good to have people in and out, but then the other side of the coin is politics, and I think I said this when Dick was with us too. Politics is the only business where people want a person to apply who the first sentence in their application is, I have absolutely no experience in what I'm applying for. I have no idea about those people where I'm going to go to work, which in this case is Washington, D.C., and I want you to hire me. Now, not to say vote, but hire me, because I want to go to Washington, D.C. for 2 terms, and then I'm going to come home. Well, the question is, who is his leader there? Some guy that's been in 20 to 30 years? And then he made the statement, too, which was interesting. I would never be in as long as Markey, but if I were, I would have solved this, this, and this. Wow, he's making a pitch against term limits, because he's saying, if I stayed all those times, I would have solved all these problems. Well, that means if you're there, you're going to solve the problem. But I choose not to be there.
I think I would look at that from a slightly different perspective.
Well, I know you would.
Yeah, I would say that what he meant by that
Okay.
is that if he had the opportunity to
Yeah.
be in there as long as Markey was,
That's right.
he would have been able to accomplish a lot more than Markey did. The other thing I might ask you, Dawn, is why do you think the president is only allowed to serve 2 terms?
Well, what happened, we know what happened. What happened when Franklin Delano Roosevelt decided to go for a 3rd term. There's 2 things in life. There's law and there's tradition. And tradition was always set by days gone by, and no one had ever run for the 3rd term. The only reason that Roosevelt ran for the 3rd term was the fact that the war was still going on. Otherwise, he never would have done that. But as soon as he did it, he knew he was dying, and he shouldn't have run. I mean, if you had a job and you were dying and you didn't resign from that job, people would say, why did you stay there? Well, he believed, Roosevelt, that they needed someone as good as him in there. But an interesting thing happened politically, which politics is a terrific story in itself. I mean, not only Lincoln and Washington, but and Roosevelt. He picked a guy who was just a nobody, Harry Truman. Mm-hmm. And yet Harry Truman is looked back on as give 'em hell, Harry. And he gave it to them, and he took an election which he totally wasn't going to win. Dewey wins, and he won the election.
I know.
So my point is, the 3rd term he ran was most interesting, but at that time, as a matter of fact, when they put in the article of the Constitution, which that's what it called for, to limit the term, by the way. Term limits in the executive branch is by a constitutional article. And when they did that, though, they made sure to omit the man who was sitting in at the time, which was Harry Truman.
That was convenient.
So it was as if we're not out to get that guy.
Yeah.
But my point is, the reason that presidents can't run, to be honest with you, and I will, these are all a matter of opinion. Joe Kennedy is now the rep in Raynham with Stephen Lynch. His dad, his father, was a representative from in Boston area, not for us. Joe Jr., let's say, or Joe, who knows what number, because there was Joe the Elder, who was the billionaire. There was Joe Jr., who was killed in combat. And then there is Bobby's kid, Joe, and this is the Bobby was this kid's grandfather. But the point is that this guy quit the House because it was so dull. The stress, not putting the job down, but the stress is not there at the legislative end of it. The stress is definitely there at the executive. All you've got to do is look at these presidential people, and because your original question was, why presidential? The first term, they age about 10 years. The second term, they try to stay alive so they can write a book when they get out. So the office falls apart every single time. There's a second term, never mind third, second term. So they're lucky they can get through too. Whereas Tip O'Neill, and there was some guy that just didn't run again. I guess he was 97 or something. I don't know. They can live forever in those jobs. The stress isn't there.
Well, you're right about the stress in terms of, let's say, the Congress versus the leader of our country, the executive branch, the VP, whatever.
That's right.
However, I look at it and I say this. There was a reason why our forefathers put that term limit in the Constitution for the executive branch.
They didn't.
For the executive branch.
Yeah, but our forefathers didn't do that.
Well, our historic fathers passed the term limit. You mentioned Roosevelt.
Yeah, well, that's...
Yeah, right.
He's not a founding...
Well, he didn't write the Constitution,
No.
yeah, exactly. But the reason was that they wanted to prevent too much familiarity and too much power vesting in one individual because of that familiarity. And also... So
there's reason for term limits for the executive branch.
But now I'll talk about the congressional branch too, and I'll say the same thing. When you're in Congress that long, you tend to, after a period of time, to owe a lot of people a lot of favors for the reasons you mentioned.
Or they owe you.
Or they owe you. Are you politically savvy? And so, just putting together laws that make sense on their face may not be the easiest thing to do, because there can be disruptions to that by virtue of, well, I have to do something now for my colleague here, or I have to change my opinion so that I can get what I want and so forth.
Yeah.
And
that's
baggage, though.
That's compromise.
Well, it can be compromised, but it can also result on maybe not the best decision on a particular ruling. The other thing is,
that's a matter of opinion.
Yes, it is, and that's why I'm giving it to you. And I think it's a matter of fresh ideas too.
Yeah.
You get people in there and they run things, in accordance with their beliefs and so forth.
Yeah.
There's no fresh ideas coming in. There's nothing to recirculate things. And if you look at where we are now in the Congress, just as an example, I mean, it's pitiful.
I know.
Congress isn't doing their job.
But here's the thing about it. You have to be realistic and face the reality. What this gentleman has done, he gave 3 points, and now I'm not sure exactly what all 3 were. One of them was term limits.
Right.
People know that when he goes down, and the other one was, if you don't balance the budget, you won't get paid. Think about a guy just lands in an airplane, gets a cab to Washington, he doesn't know where his office is. They point to a clothes closet and they'd say, well, we got your desk in there, you go right in there. And the guy, he's a nobody. And he says, oh, you got anything you want to say, sir? Yes, I want term limits, and I don't want people to be paid. And they said, oh, that's a very good idea. Thank you very much for that idea. You and I know that's not going to happen. Why do we constantly take people who give us promises they can't? He talks about the politician making promises they don't deliver. And what does he do? His platform is set up with 2 out of the 3, and I don't even remember the third, but 2 out of the 3, John, not going to happen.
Well,
Not gonna happen.
the only thing he does, I mean, Republicans have been calling for a balanced budget for a long time, which simply means balance the budget, which they're supposed to do. They're using
Who's the last president that balanced the
they're
budget?
using
Who's
taxpayer
the last
money.
president that balanced the budget?
Probably Clinton.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well,
Well,
I'm
he
not
was a member of
suggesting
the-
one political party over another.
Well,
here.
you are,
I'm
because you
saying,
said Republicans.
well, Republicans always have that as a tenet.
Well, then
Now,
what happened to George
Democrats
Bush?
do not necessarily have. Well, George Bush was in power with a lot of wars. You know, when you're fighting
Which he
wars, it's hard to come up with
Which
money
he
right
declared
away.
on his own. You know, they
know
had
what
a
I'm
thing
saying?
the other day on, I don't know if you saw it, but the last war to be declared by the Congress, which is
Yeah,
World War II,
that's right.
Korea.
Yeah, you're right.
And
Korea
this is
was
why
not.
Harry
Korea's-
Truman, tell it like it is, Harry.
Korea's still going.
Well, no, but see, he called. Harry Truman did not call that a war. Vietnam was called a
Right.
war. Iraq, Afghanistan, a war. But Harry didn't call it a war because he knew it wasn't a war.
Yeah.
He called it a police action. That's what he called it. And when MacArthur said, if I can go over the 38th parallel, I can put this thing to bed for
Right.
you, to say Harry Truman didn't like MacArthur would be
Yeah.
modest. He disliked him intently.
Yeah.
And the reason was political. That Eisenhower was and MacArthur were not his kind of people.
Yeah.
And so he disavowed MacArthur. And by the way, some historians will argue MacArthur was correct.
Yeah.
So the point is that these ongoing things that happen in war, George Bush went to war because George Bush wanted to go to war, not because we should have declared war, not because there was what was it? There was some sort of a weapon that they were inventing in.
George Bush had been told that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction.
And
He'd
it
been
was,
told
was it right or wrong?
It wasn't right. It turned out not to be right. However, he didn't unilaterally decide that. That was based upon all the best reports from his security agencies,
Oh.
and including, by the way, Mr. Colin Powell, who agreed that, yes, you've got to get on board here and you've got to do something with
Colin
this
Powell's a
because of-
Republican.
Yeah, I know he is, but I'm saying...
No, but I'm saying, well, I will tell you.
But Colin Powell now decides we shouldn't have been in that war, but at the beginning, he not only agreed with it, he advocated for it, and a lot of Democrats did at the time too, based upon the information that was available.
Let's see if you-
But I think, Don,
Yeah.
to get back to this issue here of balancing the budget,
Yeah.
which is...
You
which is
can't do if you go to
where
war
we
without
started.
taxes.
It's tough to do if you suddenly find yourself in a war without taxes. That's true.
That's right.
But as it stands now, we're bailing out of virtually every war, except we seem to be going back into Syria.
We don't pay.
Nobody knows why. Nobody knows why we're all of a sudden playing with Syria. If we had acted sooner when something could have been done, we might have been better off. But if you agree that we could probably get on to another topic, or we'll cover this whole show with this topic.
Oh, no, I don't
How would
agree
you
with
like
you
to
at
do
all. I don't agree with you at all.
All right.
Because there was a career diplomat
Yeah.
who had proof that there was no weapons of mass destruction. And what they did was they disregarded everything he said.
You know what, though, Don?
And no,
Think
but
about
what did they do, though, John, to get even with him? Do you know what they did?
it.
The vice president, who was on television within the last day or two saying, we should take this guy who's given up those cigarettes and, and blah, blah, blah. I don't disagree with him. But I'm saying he was the guy that gave up this man's wife who was a spy. He gave her up by name. And when he gave her up by name, all of her connections that were undercover were exposed. The vice president of the United States, to get even with the guy who said there are no weapons of mass destruction, he gave up that young lady's name and said, "Oh, you see her coming around, she's socially at all the clubs, and she's at, well, she's really a spy." Well, thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. In the meantime, in some nations, you'd have been dragged out into the street, and it would not have been a pleasant thing when you give up spy. The worst thing, in my way, and this is why that guy that's over in Hong Kong now, I'm wondering about him. If you give up spies, of all the jobs I'd never take, and there are very few I wouldn't take, it would be a spy. Because that is the most difficult job, and you're always one day away from being assassinated.
You're not the James Bond type.
No way. Bullet between the eyes. There's McKinnon. There he is there. Get him. Yeah, he's a spy. You know?
Well,
so I would never do that. But this vice president gave up a spy. And she was saying, well, no, I don't. Well, what could she say? She was a spy.
Well, let me tell
Do
you.
you remember that, though? I didn't know if you remember that.
I remember the situation.
Giving
in
up the
general.
spy?
Yeah, but let me tell you this.
And it was okay
First
when he
of
did
all, the problem that I would have with that is,
Yeah.
you know, you can't prove a negative. So when you say this person could prove that there's no weapons of mass destruction,
Yeah.
that can't be. Because just because that person hasn't found any evidence of it doesn't mean that there isn't any evidence of it.
But was he
And-
right?
And when it came in
Who
from,
was right?
well, yeah, but that's the way it turned out. That doesn't mean at the time that they shouldn't have felt that it was necessary to react, because they did. But my point, and getting back again to what we started with, is the tax aspect and the issue that Republicans have always been for balancing the budget. I think Mr. Gomez has the same idea. He throws in the issue of, if you don't balance the budget, you shouldn't get paid. I think you could say, in effect, if you don't do your job, you shouldn't get paid. Because balancing the budget is doing your job. Clinton did his job.
You know,
and many
of all
others
the
did
people
their
that have
jobs.
in this room, a guy that was an auditor understands that you can do, I'm sorry to say this, anything you want with numbers.
Oh, yeah,
Right? You,
within reason,
and therefore,
until the auditor
And-
catches you.
and but what I'm saying is that this president went to war, and he cut taxes for the rich, and he never mind.
the rich?
Yeah, for the rich. The rich got their taxes cut at that time.
Well, I
Those
seem to
people went-
remember he installed things like the payroll cut, which
and I thank him for
Obama
that.
let expire, and now we all have to pay more from our paycheck.
Imagine having to pay taxes. What's this country coming to?
Yeah, I know. You know, after the Civil War, taxes were only 3%. You know that. don't you?
Well, I know there was no
Now-
income
now
tax
they've
until
gone up a
around,
little
yeah.
bit. Yeah,
There was
3%.
no, there was
Now-
no income tax.
That was to pay for the reparations of the war. How did we
I
get
know.
up to, what do we have now, 38, something like that?
But what I'm saying is that, and we can't get on something else because this is a dead horse.
Yeah.
The fact that a man goes to war and doesn't say to people, you're going to have to pay for World War II, we all agreed we'd have to pay for it.
Well, we had no
And-
choice there.
No, but I'm saying
Yeah, we were attacked.
we were rationed. We paid a price. If you did in Iraq, Afghanistan, if you did that, what we did, meaning we the country did in World War II, that would have been over in a very short order. People would say, we don't want to suffer for this. Hey, Bush said, well, you don't have to suffer. I'm going to cut everybody's taxes, and we're going to. And we all know how government takes care of shortages. They print it, the federal government. And by the way, you say, because you know it. You'd be surprised how many people don't understand that. Well, okay, I think we built the. Do you want to give some more on Gomez? Because to me,
No,
I think he's a
again-
wonderful human being.
Yeah,
I mean,
again,
the credentials are good. I would
I'm looking
I would buy
forward
his
to,
book.
I'm looking forward to the fresh approach.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind about the character of the man.
Yeah. Oh no.
Given what he's done and what he's accomplished, there's no doubt in my mind about the personal drive of the man.
No.
There's no doubt in my mind about whether he could bring to bear all of his experience in terms of foreign affairs, military issues right now.
Make a good selectman.
And he'd be a good selectman. But it's just the idea that, he has a mind of his own, and
Yeah.
sooner or later, I'm sure he'll be tainted by some political baggage as everyone is, but let's get everything we can out of him while he's still fresh.
But he's still
And
in
he's not beholden to anybody.
Get in that corner office there, Mr. Gomo, Gamey,
Yeah.
something like that. So anyway, let me
Okay.
say one more thing now before we get into other things of
Yeah.
significance. And these aren't in order, John. If you see one you like, we've got a list here because this is the way we cover ourselves. Anyway, June the 22nd, for those who watch this week now, if you watch it next week, you know the 22nd has come and gone. June the 22nd at 10 o'clock at the Raynham Town Hall, there will be the dedication of the Veterans Memorial. And I'd appreciate it as many people to support veterans, which this country and this town does, could come down. And there'll be a few guest speakers, and there'll be the dedication. I talked to Chris Gallagher this morning. The bricks have arrived to finish off the star, and with the names on it. And I've told him I'm in favor of keep selling those bricks because there's two things. One is you have to maintain a thing once you build it, and it's a beautiful thing, by the way. And the other thing is that I believe there are still some streets that don't have the signs for the veterans who lost their life in combat. And so I think we've got some miles to walk
That's a
before we
noble
sleep on that.
cause.
It is. And it was started by John McGarry, whose brother, I believe was James, was killed in the Vietnam War. And his bridge is over Route 138, over 495. Oliver is over 495 on Route 104. And so these are things which are done in memory of veterans. And the one thing that amazes me, to you, we alluded before we started to the possibility, could there a draft come back? When I was the age of military service, if you were to go to a crowded room and say, how many, stand up if you've been in the, most of them would have been.
Right.
Today, I go to things and I'm sort of hold back on standing up sometimes when they play the different songs because there's only a handful of people. So for the veterans, there are, like they say, less than 1% now. And so it's good to honor those who did, though.
A lot of those people, of course, at the time were from World War II and earlier wars, and a lot of them have passed now. And so,
World War II, very, very few left. Very few left. And Korea is beginning to, by the wayside. And Vietnam, of all the wars, and I've talked to Vietnam veterans, that was shown disrespect. I came out of the Korean War, and people on the street say, where you been, Don? And I said, well, I was away for a couple of years. Oh, and that was that. But with Vietnam veterans tell me, I've got people in this town who tell me they got on an airplane and somebody started yelling at them about the justice of and they treated them with disrespect. Shame on those people for the rest of their life, shame. I don't know how they could make up for doing things like that, not showing.
I think that
veterans
attitude is changing.
I hope so.
Yeah, when they put history in perspective,
Yeah.
and they realize that, first of all, these brave men
Vietnam
and
was
women
a-
that fought in Vietnam,
Yeah.
they did what their government told them to do.
That's all.
So they can never be held accountable for the cause.
No.
They did what their government told them to do. Now, you could question the government in terms of whether or not it was
I
reasonable
somewhat
to get
question
in there.
those making a hero out of those who didn't go, to tell you the truth, because of.
Yeah, well,
of-
that
and that's
fell,
another story.
Yeah, that was
another
in there
story.
with the movement
Yeah.
of the hippies and
Yeah.
and so forth.
Yeah,
and
that's another
free
story.
love.
We'll get going
We
on
gotta
that
do a
someday.
separate show on that,
Yes,
though.
sirree, Bob. Where are we, John? What
Well,
are we
I
on? We've
think-
got we've saying to people, please go and vote on a Tuesday.
Yes.
It's the 25th. It's next a week from this following Tuesday, and it's the last Tuesday in the month of June. Please go and vote and make your decision between two very fine people. And I know we've talked a little bit about Gomes, so I guess I've got to say something about Ed Markey.
Oh, yeah.
That as a Democrat, and people, I believe in the two-party system. Some people don't believe in that. So majority are independent now, and that's
The
fine.
majority in Massachusetts are independent.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
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 And but I'm saying that many of these nations that do not have the two-party system, it is chaos. So I believe in the two-party system. So I believe in the Republicans. I believe in the Democrats. And what I see of Ed Markey, he is your classic Democrat. And
Definitely.
therefore, things that Democrats are for, Ed Markey is for. And so that is why I will vote for Ed Markey, because I am a Democrat.
In the current term, apparently, he voted 92% of the time in line with his party. So you're absolutely right.
He's my party.
He is a Democrat.
That's right. And when you see a man running from another party, quote, Republican, the first thing they tell you is, believe me, I'm not really a Republican. They tell you that they're, because they know if they
He's
say...
a new Republican.
If they say I'm a Republican, Massachusetts, it's over, so they got to
He says he's a new Republican.
I know he does.
Yeah,
I know he does. But I'm just saying, Ed Markey is honest to the degree that he's not trying to pretend something he's not. He is as he is. There it is. He is a Democrat, and I happen to believe in the Democratic Party.
The
and so
last
therefore
poll
my
that
vote will be for Ed
Yeah, I
Markey.
know.
Although I will say, and people say, well, what about, yes, I was for Lynch.
The last poll that I just saw, in
Yeah.
fact, this morning, I went...
15 points or
No, actually, the average is anywhere from 6 to 10 points. So he closed the gap quite a bit already in terms of, people giving him consideration. But he's up against a juggernaut. Come on, if you got Mr. Clinton coming here and Mr. Obama
I don't
coming
think you
here,
do us, Ms.
and
Meade, that
Hillary
much, to be
coming
honest
in
with
here,
I
you
don't
don't?
think- no.
Like you said earlier, I think, in just casual conversation, you think Clinton could get reelected right now?
I think he could.
Well, there you go.
But
So
who?
he's
You think Bill
influential.
Clinton's? Let me put it this way about Bill Clinton: if I had a sister, and I don't, I wouldn't have her date. so there are different people
Does
that
how
have
did-
different strengths.
Does that fit
Yes,
into presidential
I
qualities?
don't think so, because some of the presidents were worse than Billy.
Yeah.
But Billy wasn't
That's true.
exactly a scout honor, type
No.
of guy.
No, he
but,
wasn't.
But yeah, I said to you before the show that if an election were held today, Bill Clinton would win. Well, one of the reasons was you said it, John.
Yeah.
He balanced the budget.
There you go. Yeah.
He was a conservative
you-
Southern Democrat.
Well, he didn't start out.
he wasn't
that
liberal.
He didn't start out that way. When he went for his second term, and
Yeah.
something that he did, and everybody acknowledges this,
Yeah.
the reason why he got into the second term is because he moved back to the center. And that included balancing the budget
Yeah.
and included a lot of other views that people could tolerate. Now,
We all
Obama
like
won,
him. We
Obama
like
won
him now.
re-election, but
Yeah.
he didn't move. He's still over on the left side. He just happened to appeal to the people, and so they elected
I
him.
like Obama, but boy, if he isn't an argument for people getting elected that really don't have the experience,
Well,
which is what you're preaching today.
there you go.
You got him in. You got him there. How's he doing?
There you go.
How's he doing?
Well, people are different.
Sure,
People are
John. Your guy who has no experience is good, and my guy who has no experience is Obama.
No, but my guy
Yeah.
also faced a tremendous amount of adversity throughout his life with his parents. And now I know you're going to say that
No, but
Obama is.
No, I'm not. I'm
had it
going to
rough.
say, what difference does that make in the big picture of things?
It
You
speaks-
had adversity.
I did, and it speaks to character.
To have adversity, you mean people who don't have adversity cannot have character?
No, but I'm saying that if you make it through adversity, that points out that in fact you've proven your character, and it also speaks, I believe, to your drive and what you intend to accomplish. Now, when I was 50 years old, I climbed Mount Mendenhall Mountain next to the glaciers in Alaska.
Was that you and the other?
That was me. now,
that was
this-
me, the other guy.
Now, this is a little bit funny, only to depart temporarily.
I
here.
know.
My whole family was on a cruise with me. And,
you
we
were the
thought,
only one.
well, we thought we were going on one of those excursions, where we'd walk across the fields,
Yeah.
be nice flowers, and there'd be butterflies all over the place.
Scotch and the
Yeah.
Irish.
It turned out that it was a mountain climb that we didn't realize. Now, I should have
Where
realized.
was this? What country did you
This,
go in?
this was in Alaska. It's Mount Mendenhall.
You're climbing a mountain
Yeah,
in
well,
Alaska.
well, here's what happened. We should have realized when I got out there to partake.
And we're listening to you about advice on who should be president and senator.
Well,
and
but
you've now
see,
find yourself in
these are the
Alaska
thing-
on a mountain.
But these things build character.
and you thought you
though.
were going to the beach.
No, I thought I was going through a nice field on an easy walk. I should have known because there were a couple of Swiss guys, you know,
Yeah.
that looked like they were
Oh,
ready
they're
to
the
yodel.
Swiss are the worst.
They
Did
had
they
the
yodel?
boots on.
Did
and
they yodel?
the whole thing. No, they didn't.
Yodel.
But they said, "Oh, you know what? You all look in pretty good shape." Now, remind you, I'm 50 years old. Back then, I was in pretty good shape. But
Yeah.
they said, "So we're going to climb the mountain today." So I thought, well, why not? I ended up climbing over 6,000 feet, with some of it handholds
Who went with you?
to get my entire family.
Your wife?
My wife went with me.
With the whole
We all
thing?
made it. We all made it. There's this poor girl behind me who was slipping all over the place because she didn't have the proper shoes on. And because I was getting winded
Yeah.
and it was hard to go further,
Yeah.
you know, I was more than willing to stand back and help her.
This is a very sad
but the
story.
thing
You're
is-
bringing a tear to my eye.
Yeah,
This
well,
is a sad story.
Here's the story, though.
Oh, there's more to
the
it?
story is,
It's
I
sadder?
look back on
There's
that
more
now
to it?
with great fondness, Dawn. It was one of the
fact that
greatest
you-
things that I ever accomplished
It
in
was
my
in
life.
your bucket list.
And I could never do it now. Well, it wasn't on my bucket list, but
Well,
it
my
became.
money says you can do it,
Yeah.
and I'm ready to bet somebody. If they want to bet $5, if you go back, I'll bet you can do it.
I'll bet you that well, I'd be willing to take that bet, but that's for another day.
I mean,
but
you
anyway,
did it the first time. Why did you
the
fall?
point being that this man has done what he has accomplished already. He's been sensational.
Yeah.
He's got new ideas and a fresh face, and I'll vote for him.
And Obama had it easy all his life. Oh, what happened to
No,
his
I
father?
didn't say
Where
that.
did his father go? And I voted for him because he's Irish, you know. So,
Yeah, I know. See,
You-
that's the way you are.
I know. I stay with the Irish. If you're Irish,
Before we go on
Okay.
to the next
what
thing,
should we go on to?
I'll ask you one other thing.
Okay. All right.
The big topic right now,
Yeah.
hot topic right
Yes,
now,
okay, the hot
everybody's
topic,
thinking about,
yes,
is the National Security Agency.
Yes.
This whole issue of security versus privacy.
You mean tapping
Yes.
your phone and
Yeah.
mine?
I have a little bit of historical perspective on
Okay.
that, and if you're willing,
please, yeah.
and we can cover that topic,
Yes.
I think it would be nice to do because
do that.
it's so important right now.
Yes.
So it's an extremely important discussion to have that. It's important to know that our
This is from a guy who thought he was going to walk to the beach, and he
Yeah.
ended up 6,000 feet in the air, unable to breathe.
There's no butterflies at the beach, but anyway. Our forefathers established this country on principles of freedom and privacy.
Yeah, that's true.
The
That's
Fourth Amendment to the Constitution protects all Americans against unlawful search and seizure. And it was added, I don't know if you know this, was added in large part due to the British, because before they came
They used to
over,
listen into the phone calls.
the British used to actually go into people's homes
Yeah, I
without any authorization or whatever, and do whatever they wanted, or, look for anything they wanted, look through anything they
Yeah, I
wanted.
know
So
that,
our
yeah.
forefathers said,
They were not our
we-
friends.
yeah, no, we got to give some protection to the American people. Now, we also recognize that our government has a duty to protect U.S. citizens from
Yes.
threats by
Yes.
terrorists,
Yes.
others seeking to
Does
do
the
us
end
harm.
justify the means, is what we're going to say here in a minute.
That's what some people say.
That's where we're going.
There always has been a natural tension between increasing national security and preserving personal rights and privacy. We know that. A law-laden, totalitarian government gives the government complete control over people's lives. Result, no privacy and no freedom.
Big Brother.
Right. Read George Orwell's book titled 1984.
Is that Big Brother?
I'd recommend that for everybody, just as, for the purpose of the reading.
Sure.
Conversely, no laws means every man for himself, or anarchy.
You can't have that.
We can't have that. It's also true, and I think you'd agree with this, that laws are very seldom reversed. So once they're on the books, they tend to stay on the books.
Unless it's about alcohol.
There are exceptions.
You'll drink to that.
Well, that was to benefit the people, right?
Right?
Ultimately, a system of fair and just laws that minimize the loss of personal freedom and privacy is the approach promoted by our Constitution.
Right.
Now, since the Fourth Amendment of our Constitution protects us against unreasonable search and seizure of your personal goods and information, this has translated into the government authorities requiring probable cause and a warrant which is specific as to property to be searched and seized.
And that's fair.
That's fair.
Yeah.
We all agree with
Yeah.
that. Now, the NSA's decision to secretly collect personal phone records and website activity of over 100 million U.S. citizens is an unprecedented information mining activity and seems to be a gross overreach into a U.S. citizens' personal privacy. Now, granted, they haven't supposedly listened to the calls, or they've only looked at the calls when they were made, who they were speaking to, etc. Now, officials agree that the NSA secret monitoring program has prevented various plots, terror plots, and so forth. Although when they say that, they generally don't have a lot of specifics. And also, you got to remember that even though this has been in place with the NSA, the program did not foil the underwear bomber, the Fort Hood shooter, or the Boston Marathon bombers. Those were all done under different circumstances. So I think it's up to the American people now to look at this very, very closely, because it's so important and it involves our freedoms. And by the way, they're even more sensitive now because of the recent scandals involving privacy concerns by certain other agencies, which are also unprecedented, which we could talk about. You know, the IRS, the Associated Press scandal, etc. So, interestingly, on this topic, Don, I've never seen anything like this, because the political party people are split in assessing this situation. And it gives testament to the depth of opposing views and emotions surrounding the issue. You've got a bunch of Democrats that are in favor of what the NSA is doing. You've got a bunch of Democrats that are opposed. You got a bunch of Republicans that are in favor of what the NSA is doing. You got a bunch that are opposed. So the American people, it seems to me, should monitor the NSA situation closely and relinquish their right to freedom and personal privacy begrudgingly. Once it's gone, it won't come back. Now, do you remember on the first show that I told you that in addition to having conservative leanings, you know, I also believed in, you know, the freedom aspects.
That's what makes Massachusetts great,
people, etc.
because we're diversified in our thinking.
So what is your thinking based upon what they've done? And if you want to talk about the, you know, the kid that supposedly alerted this, the whistleblower or traitor, however you want to phrase him, what do you think about that?
Well, I think, first of all, they've pretty well defined what a whistleblower is, and he's certainly not a guy hanging out in Hong Kong. I think if you were trying to get away with something in China, and Hong Kong, by the way, is China, I think you'd best get set for the rest of your life to be in a very difficult little prison. And so that is probably the last place in the world a whistleblower would go. He's wrong. He should be arrested. What should happen to him? Treason is a very high degree of challenge to prove. But if he is committed treason, then of course he has as major a problem as anyone who's ever been convicted. The question would be, how come they hired him in the first place? How did he get the job he got?
Yeah.
How did he get the secret information he got? So, yeah, that's a very complicated one. I'm not in favor of him. I'm from the old school, though, John. I mean, I'm an old liner that says that when I went into Army intelligence, they could go back and ask anything and do anything they wanted to do to find out whether I was okay to work Army intelligence. I have no objections to that. So I have no objections to them tracing my phone calls to whatever they want to do. I think they have to have a reason, and that's where that's the catch-22, and that's what you're referring to. Do they have enough reason to do what they did? And I don't know, as you and I sit here today, whether they have enough reasons for doing what they did. If it were the fellows that were in the marathon, and there was phone calls with their mother over in Russia at that time, I'm still trying to figure out how two people came over from Russia in a hardship and then went back to Russia and left their two kids on welfare in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I'm still trying to figure that one out. So I'm really uninformed as to why these things took place. Would I object to those two young men to have their phone tapped? Not at all. So I'm for tapping a phone of someone who needs it. The problem is, John, what you're going to tell me, and that is the problem.
Yeah. See, in this instance, though, when we talk about the tension again between freedom and security.
Yeah.
And we all understand that you can't have all of both. President Obama said that. He said there's no way you can have 100%
That's right.
security and 100%
Yeah.
freedom, and that's true. The question is, what is the proper line? Given that our country was found with a bias towards freedom, and because we were suppressed, what I'm saying is that we should make extremely sure that regardless of the alleged motive, whether it's to protect us or not protect us, you know, we want to preserve our freedom. What millions of soldiers have fought for over the years,
And laid
what,
down their
what
lives.
the Constitution
Yeah.
covers, what the
Yeah.
Bill of Rights covers, you
Yeah.
know, our very
Yeah.
foundation. So I'm saying that it can't be that great a deal if they miss these three incredible events. Now they say they've stopped quite a few of them, but they never give any details on it. Which ones? So when you take your mining information and say, okay, but I'm not going to look at it. But if I ever need it, it'll be there for me to look at. That to me is an encroachment, I believe, on your freedom. Because, Dawn, let's face it, you know, they have the information, and they've got the website activity.
Yep.
This is a slippery slope sort of
I
thing,
know.
too. You know that. What's next? What's
Well,
next?
as long as they can go to a judge and the proof to the judge that that person is a risk, then I'm in favor of the government being able to do that.
There was a statistic on that which says that the going to the judge to get
It's like a 99%.
permission to do this thing.
But the other side of the
So
coin
I don't
is
know
maybe.
I don't know how much the judge
Yeah,
looks at
no, I
it to
don't
start
either,
with.
no.
And certainly, you know, they say, well, there's checks and balances because of the Congress. Well, we already know how much the Congress knows,
Yeah.
which isn't that much, given all the
Well, they don't tell them that much.
given all, well, that's right, given all the probes that they have going, et cetera. But that's a very, very important issue, and you
Oh, I know it is important, and it is of concern. Of course, it's concern to every citizen. That is why Obama jumps into it and is trying to rationalize. But the point is, we know they're doing things that they can't tell us. The problem is we don't trust them. Trust is pretty well gone by the
Well,
wayside.
we don't now, and with good cause. I mean, with everything that's happened,
Yeah.
you know, you don't expect these things
Yeah.
to happen. You have to have trust. There's no doubt about that. What would you like to talk about now, sir?
Well, you could jump around a little bit. One of the things that I was kind of interested in, there was an article. Oh, I don't know if I evidently still don't have it. There was an article on Haig. He went to Vietnam and he ended up meeting, and I haven't got it here, he ended up meeting with a young man, he's no longer a young man, who was a veteran of the Viet Cong, and so he was on the other side. So these two old soldiers, Hagel and Dung, they called the guy, got together and talked about the old days. And I thought, of recent wars, here's a guy that was, I think that Hagel was wounded. I think he was wounded a couple of times, and I think he went back more than he had to. But to see that now, when wars are over, you've got to be awful careful when you go to war with these countries, because the question is, what have you done as a result of the war? I will honestly believe, you know, my friends from World War II said, I was in the one we won, you were in the war we tied. And you are right to this day. And I'll be honest with you, John, as you and I sit here, I'm not sure if the group is back together, because at one time, the dictator from North Korea stopped the peace talks that have been going on
That's right.
since 1953. He stopped them. Now, are they back talking? I don't know whether they're back talking or not. But of all the wars we've done, the Korean War is a prime example how good can be done by a war, because the people in North Vietnam, they're starving to death up there. The people in South Vietnam, they're manufacturing automobiles, their quality of life is wonderful. And so because of that Korean War, which our side took aside, they live a better life. Whereas we played the domino theory, which I'm sure you're aware of. The domino is every time you want to go to war, you say, well, if we don't go to war with them, then we'll have to go to war. Or Cambodia and around it goes. But Vietnam, they won. They manufacture I go into Macy's and you can't find anything that isn't made in Vietnam.
You're absolutely right.
So they're
It's sad in a way to think of
they're
all
still
that.
a communist country.
It's
but
one of the
but
few communist countries left. There's only about a half a dozen communist countries in the entire world.
I know.
Vietnam is still one of them.
And Korea is the one that proves it really doesn't work if you take
You
it
know,
serious.
when I came to realize that, it was a number of decades ago, and
Yeah.
I'll never forget it because, you know, I grew up in the Vietnam era and
Yeah.
lost friends in the war and so forth. I was at an airport on my way to a business meeting, and I started talking to a man there who was a shoe merchandiser. And, you know, I thought, oh, he must be here because in Brockton's close by. You know that Brockton was the shoe capital of the world.
Brockton and Bridgewater.
So I said, where do you make your shoes? And he says, well, we don't make them here. I said, oh, I said, another state? He said, no, another country. I said, what country is that? He said, Vietnam.
Yeah.
I said, what? And that was the first time it hit me that after we had the war with Vietnam, here we were trading with Vietnam.
I know.
Because the cost of goods is very, very low. But
China is beginning to run into problems because some of those countries are producing items cheaper than they can.
Yeah.
So-
well, that's what happens invariably. When you reach that kind of success and you bring the lower end of the infrastructure up with you, guess
Right.
what?
Yeah.
Minimum wages.
Yeah.
You have to pay more.
Yeah.
The United States is a perfect example of that. Then you go to these countries that are just starving for a meal, and they'll do it for nothing. But the thing about Vietnam is I thought to myself, these two great friends that I lost in the war, they were wonderful people. They could have had wonderful lives. They died fighting for our country, and now, because the political winds have changed, we're open traders
Yeah.
with Vietnam. So
And to see these
you
two
asked
guys
why.
getting together really would have been a scene which should have been taped, probably, maybe it was. The fact that both these guys at one time were in a hole, aiming at each other probably, and now here they are talking trade talk.
Yeah.
And Vietnam has come such a long way.
Yeah, definitely has.
Of course, the other side of the coin is about communism. That's we all, you know, the big thing in my day was fight communism, you know.
Absolutely.
And the question is, what happened to communism? Do you think that when the best thing that could happen to China was a purchase which was made by the British, which the British are very novel in the old days. You know, we all had our time at power. And British literally bought Hong Kong. But they entered into a 99-year contract. And they said at the end of 99 years, you can have it back. Well, what did that tell you? That told you that everybody that signed that was going to be dead. They're not going to be there when the thing goes back. It's not their problem. So, okay, now suddenly it
That's
came.
one of those political motives you were talking about.
Absolutely. So you're going to be gone. This is why people who enter into these long-term contracts. And so anyway, the country of China took over Hong Kong. Now they're looking at it and they say, well, what are we going to do with this? It's making billionaires. There's millions of dollars being made. The quality of life is high. And they come over in their broken T-shirts with a hole in it, you know, and say, well, I guess we better let them do what they're doing for a while. And all of a sudden they realize, hey, wait a minute. This thing is working out pretty good. Well, that's why that kid's in Hong Kong now.
Right.
That's the last place he should be because maybe he is that. I'm not. See, the whole thing is when people do things that are stupid, sometimes people give them credit for also being intelligent. I'm not convinced he's not stupid. What's he doing in Hong Kong?
Well, he obviously
thinks
knows
Hong
his
Kong-
way around computers, regardless of his background. But to me, Don, now you
And
said,
now he's in China.
and you know, it would be perfectly appropriate to suggest that when you look at the two sides, traitor or hero, you would come down more on the traitor side.
For him.
I'm not ready to
He's a
call
traitor.
him either one yet because I don't know enough about what he did. I respect the fact that he blew the whistle on an overreach of the NSA, but if he's given secrets to China outside of that, and his father was actually on TV asking him please not to say anymore. If he's doing that,
And he's
then
having a press conference
he's
today.
clearly a traitor.
Today.
Yeah. So I think the jury's
But I mean,
still
to
out
assume
on
he's
him.
not
I think the jury's still out on him for me.
a high school dropout.
Yeah.
Now, in this day and age, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No one should be a high school
Well,
dropout.
yeah, I
In this
agree.
day and age, he was a high school dropout. Now, was he a high school dropout because he was a genius? Evidently not.
No, that was the case. His father actually said that he had some sort of sickness, though, and he made his high school diploma up the equivalent later on after he was, whether
Oh,
that's-
yes.
Yeah, that's what he said. Now, you had in your mind something about the China banks versus the North Korean banks.
Well, it surprised, and this is why, for all North Korea acts like an independent nation,
Right.
they are dependent upon China.
Oh, no question.
And we prevailed upon China, and China adhered to our
Yeah,
prevail.
yeah.
And they basically said to
about
North
that?
Korea, we're not going to deal with your banks anymore.
That's right.
They went even beyond that, though. And it finally get to the point now that they went so far that North Korea now wants to sit down with South Korea
Exactly.
for the first time in many a moon.
Exactly. Now,
And-
isn't that interesting?
Well, it shows.
Actually, they said they want to talk to us directly.
Well, they always wanted to talk
Yeah,
to us.
they definitely
We got a
want to sit down and
basketball
talk
player.
to
We
us.
sent a basketball
Yeah.
player. I think, no, to be fair, they should send over one football player, one baseball player, and after the Bruins, they should send over one hockey player
Yeah,
to talk
yeah.
to this guy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I agree. You mentioned earlier, and I think that's a sign of that. China is not so backwards as it used to be. China is a full force to contend with, not only militarily, but their economic structure is starting to advance. And they don't want to lose that.
Yeah.
And that's why they're on North Korea, not to stop problems.
That's right.
Things are going pretty good for
That's
them.
right.
Leave it like it is.
And that's what, and they may actually help North Korea in the long run because they're beginning to help themselves. There is an article that was in the paper in the last week, and I'll just allude to it, sort of. And I don't know, but the Chinese is actually beginning to empty out its farms, whereas in their villages they're beginning to destroy their own villages. 900 million people they want to come into the city. Now the farmers don't want
Why?
to go into the city because where's their job? They don't know if they've got a job
Right,
or not.
right.
But China wants them to come into the city. This is communism, though, in a form of
Yes.
dictatorship.
Yeah.
That they could come to you if you had a farm and you're doing very well in your
That's
farm
right.
and you like it, and they're going to gut your house.
That's
and
right.
they're putting you in an apartment house in a Chinese city,
Yeah.
and you're going to have to find a job somewhere. So China, though, is getting away from, because everybody knows when you go out into the outskirts,
Right.
China is a third world country.
Yeah.
They don't have plumbing.
Yeah.
They don't have sewage disposal. They are an archaic society. And so China has such a long way to go, and yet because they have so many people, I used to have a quiz in my class. I'd say, where are the most geniuses in the world? What country? And they give me, and I say China.
Yeah.
Just because the law of averages delivers
Yeah,
that
that's
number
right.
of geniuses. Now,
That's
whether
right.
they find them or not is an entirely different story. So China is a very interesting country,
Yeah.
but they are not still in our league.
Yeah.
Their roads aren't up to us. The environment.
That's true, but you know what? They practically own us now.
Wow.
I mean, they bought
Well-
most of our debt, and this is another problem we have
but they
because
don't know us.
you know,
We'll do.
we have
We'll
to deal with it.
devaluate our money, and we'll pay them back on 5 cents on the dollar. So they better be
Well,
careful
that-
because
that
the
would be a
guy said,
first.
"Well, we're going to print money.
yeah,
And we're gonna, you want money? We'll print you money. And we're going to send it over there." And so they best be careful because we're not, people underestimate the United States businessmen. I'm not, no disrespect, they're not the nicest people in the world. You had a job to find them out, and occasionally you found them out.
Occasionally
and
I
in
did.
some cases you were shocked at these
Yeah.
people who are supposed
No,
to be.
no, you're
well, there's a
absolutely
guy
right.
who went to a banquet. He's a very wonderful person, and and wait a minute now. He stole $1.8
Yeah.
million dollars, and he's having lunch in Cuba.
Yeah.
Something like that. So anyway, China better watch it. That's
Yeah,
all I'm saying.
yeah.
And they definitely don't want to go to war with us, though, which is nice.
no, they
Which is
don't,
nice.
and that's good, and theoretically it'll stay that way.
One of the things, we're getting down to the wire here now, and
Yeah.
that's good. We'd like to rename the show from Agree to Disagree because as of Tuesday, the 25th, the campaign for politics will be over. If Billy, God bless, I wish he were still with us, we could, that would be over. So I'm trying to look for a more moderate thing than, I would like Agree to Disagree as part of like, what were they thinking, which is another part of the show. And I'm just working on a title of something to change the title of it because it sounds argumentative to agree to disagree. Although
And we haven't
We've-
argued at all.
we
right?
agree on everything.
It's easy to figure out.
So I would say to the people, in 2 weeks we'll come back. Maybe we'll agree to disagree, or maybe we'll say something else. But have the good rest of June, everybody.
Yeah.
And we're now about to sign off and say thank you all for watching on our prime time, which is, I think, from 7 to 8. I think we're on from 7 to 8.
Thank you very much for watching us tonight.
Now, this is when you think.